Well, Marilyn, should we get close to starting? I see Michelle is ready. Or should we wait a few minutes or schmooze?
I'm ready whenever you guys are. I just didn't want to interrupt.
Oh, no, we're spot on time. We roll right into You Be the Judge. Starts at 6 o'clock p.m. every Wednesday, 6 to 7. So I just want to thank everyone for showing up. You can always listen to us on Apple or any other podcast channels you pick it up. Just put in You Be the Judge or Bridges Live with Dr. Paul, and it'll pop up. But other than that, you know, I'm Dr. Paul. My other co-host, lovely co-host, is Marilyn Pierre, and who ran for Circuit Court Judge of Montgomery County here in Maryland, and Judge Claudia Barber. And for that, Marilyn, there you go. We're on.
Okay.
Very good introduction. Judge Barber said that she has another meeting and she'll be coming on later, but she will be joining us. And I myself am thrilled to be having this conversation that we're going to be having today with our two wonderful special guests. We have Michael Tabor, and we also have Michelle Alonso. They're both on with us, and they are ready to start whenever we are ready to hear them. It's amazing to me what is in our drinking water. And Mike, you could start with that, and Michelle, whenever you want to, you could just jump right in. And I think you each could do a presentation, and afterwards we could get questions from the audience, because this is going to be really interesting and exciting, and I look forward to hearing all of it.
Well, before you go, I do want to say we have raised this question of drinking water in several states across the states. One, particularly Baltimore, has always been toxic from so many years. I can't even express how so many years has been toxic. And here's the crazy thing. Every political leader has known it. Everyone. Everyone who's stepped in the office as a mayor, everyone who's stepped in the office as a governor has known that Baltimore City has been toxic because of the infrastructure. And the only people that escape the toxicity is the people who can afford filters. So that leaves the African American community so out, because they even, for the last 10 years, they don't allow the kids to drink from the water fountain. That's how much they've known it's been toxic. So it's crazy that we have leaders out there who literally know that what's going on, and they refuse to do anything. But that's
well, actually, since you went down that road, I have a 3-minute video that I think, says so much about this topic, and I want to have the opportunity to play it right now if I can. And I know we're going out of order and things like that, but it is amazing to me, this video and what it says. It's a little bit, well, you'll see it, and then we'll have a discussion about it. So if I could be allowed to share.
You're the host.
This video, and like I said, it's just right on point with what we are talking about, and it's going to show people exactly what the issue that we're having with. So I don't know what, there.
Area, leading to a boil water advisory. In a hearing, the Department of Public Works said infrastructure failures were to blame.
It was a result of aging infrastructure.
But Matthew Garbar...
Sorry.
That's okay. I'll
bring it back to the beginning. I don't know why it's not going back to the beginning.
I'll recap people that's listening to this on podcast who don't have the video. What Marilyn is doing is getting ready to play a clip on the Baltimore water situation, and she's about ready
from aging pipes. Environmental Protection Agency.
Yeah, I don't know why it's not going
for her family is an ordeal.
I'm not trusting the water. I'm not comfortable with using it. I'm not comfortable with them drinking it.
Every month, the mother of two buys bottled water and boils gallons from the tap for her family to drink, cook, and brush their teeth.
It's frustrating because we got to keep up with this every single day on a daily basis.
That's because even though Baltimore's drinking water meets federal safety standards, according to the city's annual water quality reports, the water coming out of her tap is sometimes brown, which could be a sign iron is leaching from aging pipes. Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Michael Regan says Baltimore is one of countless communities across the U.S. grappling with aging water infrastructure as federal investment dwindled. Some experiencing water crises, like Flint, Michigan, Jackson, Mississippi, and rural West Virginia.
Why has the U.S. government not done more, invested more in water infrastructure across this country?
You know, there are a lot of needs in this country. Unfortunately, we have waited too long. And there are certain populations in this country, Black and brown communities, tribal communities, low-income communities, that are seeing the worst aspects of this disinvestment.
In Baltimore, it's led to problems like sewer backups and skyrocketing water bills because utilities put repair costs on consumers. And last September, routine testing discovered E. coli in the drinking water at 3 locations in West Baltimore, a predominantly Black area, leading to a boil water advisory. In a hearing, the Department of Public Works said infrastructure failures were to blame.
It was a result of aging infrastructure.
But Matthew Garbarg, who oversees Baltimore's major infrastructure projects, says it's a multifaceted problem.
So are you saying what you're saying and what city officials saying are in line? They were sort of definitive in that hearing and saying aging infrastructure definitely contributed to it.
It is definitely something that is affecting our whole system. Whether that particular case was caused by the aging infrastructure, it's really hard to tell.
We've also talked to some Baltimore residents who say when they open up their tap water, it's brown. What's your message to those people?
That is a very, very concerning thing to see. The brown is a concentration of the iron. It technically is perfectly safe to consume. It's not attractive. And if you wash clothes with it, it will stain your clothes. So we understand that. Our message is call us. No one in our system should have to go out and buy bottled water.
Last year, Maryland received $144 million from the EPA as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, which set aside about $50 billion for drinking and wastewater improvements.
How much do you need the federal government to be a partner?
We need them desperately. We need to have our local, our state, and our federal partners all aligned.
Still, the $50 billion is not nearly enough. By the EPA's own estimates, the nation's drinking and wastewater infrastructure will require more than $744 billion over 20 years just to meet existing health and environmental standards.
The resources that we have from Bill are just a shot in the arm. There's a huge resource gap here.
A gap that people here are left trying to fill themselves.
We are really struggling. We're crying out for help.
Help the EPA says it's working to provide.
Water systems have been failing our communities. It's time for government to step up, and that's what we're doing.
As a mom, all I can do is be the best I can be.
Yamiche Alcindor, NBC News, Baltimore.
That was good. So,
Okay, one of the things that I found interesting about this is sort of what we're going to talk about, but not exactly. So they're saying that it's going to cost all these billions of dollars just for infrastructure for us to get what I think should be clean, drinkable water. But we're not even talking about the infrastructure part. We are talking about the chemical part. So when you add that to the infrastructure part, it's unbelievable. But I just thought it was really, it was a really interesting segment. It just aired yesterday, if you could believe it. Wow. It just aired yesterday. So this is current events that are happening right now to the drinking water in Baltimore. And I'm pretty sure, and like they said, in several different neighborhoods. And
Marilyn,
also,
do you know what? Marilyn,
sorry.
do you know what bothers me a lot about that clip? We know the water's an issue. That's what it was talking about. But it's the portrayal of the black woman that she's single, she's raising kids by herself, because the racial biasness will say if she had a partner, if there was a man in the house, she could afford filters and maybe she could afford. I mean, it just gets twisted in the visual context of what's so damaging about the water that it it takes a conscious person to view it from a real clear lens without blaming her for living in that situation.
Yes, that is true. And as Michael and Michelle, I love the names, I love the rhythm and rhyme of it, are going to talk about, we're all in that situation. Because Michael, the article that you and Michelle wrote in Pathways magazine said that 100% of Maryland's waterways have been found to have atrazine in it. And so go on from there then.
Well, let me introduce myself, although you guys have done an incredible job. But, well, as you've alluded to, what Michelle and I are going to address are a little bit different. So I know people from this audience because I've been involved in politics, trying to get people with integrity into public office. That's what I've not been involved in politics. That's what I've been in. And that's why I like Marilyn. I believe she is an honest person, and we should have more people like her in political office. So that's an aside. But this issue of drinking water goes back to me as a farmer. So I've been a farmer for 50 years. And I'm going to say what started it for me was in Fulton County, Pennsylvania, right across the line from Maryland. After a neighbor of mine, I watched him spray the field with, as you were saying, atrazine. And atrazine is a herbicide. It's called a pre-emergent herbicide. So as I watched him spray the field, and he finished spraying the field in preparation to plant corn and soybeans, he then went to the creek and washed out the sprayer. And I said, Delmar, isn't there something wrong with what you're doing? I mean, I asked innocently. This is 40 years ago. He said, Mike, it gets so diluted by the time it reaches the Potomac, there's nothing there. Well, okay, so that was the first experience I had. And I've slowly been watching this from the experience of a farmer concerned with the farm chemicals, the residues that go into water. And then more recently, something called PFAS, which are industrial chemical runoff. They're entering the water system. Now, both of these things are entirely legal, because there's no regulate, people know who do this, stopping these things. There's no state, county, in most cases, federal regulations to stop the use of these dangerous poisons, and they are dangerous. So when I wrote a piece for Pathways on the subject, usually a writer expects to get edited. So when I sent it to Michelle as the editor of Pathways, instead of editing it, she increased it by 1,000 words. So now I'll come back, but let me go on to Michelle and get her input, her introduction.
Michelle, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Hi, good evening. First off, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I will say that as an editor, I always joke that editors are experts on subjects for a little while. I do not purport to be an expert in this area. When I received the article originally from Mike, I kind of immersed myself in the topic from the standpoint of an editor to fact check and look up the references that he cited, and to look at it from the lens of my readership, to give them background, because of course Mike is coming from the perspective of having decades of knowledge in this area and in the industry and as an activist. So to shape the article to give it context so that it was more interesting and more accessible to a wider readership who may not have had the knowledge or the background of the industry or the issue at hand. So that's why I spent a lot of time, and we ended up collaborating on it, because I wanted to make sure people were understanding the nature of the issue and how the system works. Otherwise, just saying that there's poison in the drinking water, well, that's great, but you have to understand the context of why we're having the discussion. So therein lies sort of my contribution. I will not say that I'm an expert on chemicals in the water. I just built upon the foundation that Mike has been laying for the last 40 years in his role as a farmer and as an activist.
And you want to be sure I was accurate.
And I wanted to make sure he was accurate, of course. And I wanted to make sure that people had information and to give the article framework, not just the issues, but also actionable items at the end so that there are some practical applications. Okay, here is the issue. This is what happens. Now, what can we do about it? Because obviously it affects everybody. It doesn't just, and there are obviously certain areas that are more affected than others, but it is a universal concern. So it's going to take a universal effort to fix it.
And that's terrific. We didn't get a chance to introduce Michelle. Michelle is one of the editors of Pathways magazine. I think we all know Pathways. We see it everywhere at the stores and things like that. So thank you so much for joining us. Like the video said, like the woman in the video said, and someone just asked the same question. The question was, well, if we boil the water, doesn't that mean that the water then becomes clean? And I would like one of you to answer that question.
Let me go on a little bit more with my presentation.
Okay.
Boiling water, water out of the refrigerator with a filter, these are other problems. These are not the problems of chemical poisons, in this case called PFAS, or residues of chemicals from farm use. This has little to do with that earlier presentation. This is a kind of a separate issue, if you will, that's not addressed by boiling or the use of bottled water. So I just want to make those points. But let me ask a question first of whoever's out there. Does anybody have a serious, so I'm not talking about a Brita or a refrigerator filter, is there anyone there in the audience who has a serious in-house water filter? Any raised of hands? Is there Teresa?
Yeah, a couple of hands went up.
I don't have a serious in-house water filter, but I do distill all of my water. I have an in-house distiller.
Oh, a reverse osmosis?
Yes.
Oh, I'm curious. What did that cost you?
When I got it, it was less than $300.
Wow.
And it's been working for almost 10 years.
So I just want to point out that's the standard, pretty much top of the line, what you have installed. It's hard to get better than that. Did someone else raise? So thank you. So let me just ask you out of curiosity, and this is anecdotal, did any of your children, any of the people that drink the water in your house, have any of them come down with serious diseases or the kind of things?
No, because in using the distiller or the reverse osmosis, I also use, because I'm taking everything out, then I have to put the minerals back in. And so I use Zuma water, which I package, mineral packets that I put in to each glass of water that I take.
So I just want to say this is closer to the discussion that I've had. And the way you've addressed it is more on target from my perspective. So was there anyone else who was using a sophisticated filter in their house or in their tap? I can't. I'm sorry.
Let me read the what's in the chat, and then the other people who want to speak for themselves could speak for themselves. Sarah says that she has a 2-cylinder system, but it does not have reverse osmosis. Jim said that he has an inline carbon filter for water to his refrigerator, and that lasts about 6 months before it tastes bad. And okay. Martha Peterson, you want to speak for yourself, but you said that you have an Enagic machine. Did I pronounce that right, Martha?
I don't know, Mike. You may have heard of it before. It's called an Enagic machine, and it's supposed to alkalize the water.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a different issue. It's another issue. But those other two people who have those serious filters, once again, I believe they're closer to the issue at hand of what I would like to talk about a little more.
Okay, and sorry, one more thing, Mike. Molly says that she has an under the sink system that has 2 cylinders and she changes that about once a year. And Holly said that she has an Aquasana that they just said a renewal notice, it needs to be updated and replaced.
The one under the sink, who is the manufacturer? Is it
answer for yourself? The one under the sink?
Molly?
I'll go down to the basement and take a look.
It might be a multi-pure. I'm not sure. No. Well, anyway, okay.
And
so
then
let me.
Dee wants to say something, and Martha wants to say something.
I didn't see Dee. Is Dee there?
I'm here.
So Dee, what kind of filter do you have?
I have an Everpure.
Oh, okay.
I change the canister once a year, and it costs me $120 or so for a canister every year. I don't remember what I first paid the plumber to put in the system in the first place.
And do you know what it filters out of your water?
I'm trying to find that out. I've been online for the last 20 minutes looking things up, but I keep getting a lot of other information that's not what I'm looking for.
So I'll just read what ours does. So this is a multi-pure. This is not a commercial. In Consumer Reports, it was rated pretty high last month. So this addressed arsenic, bacteria and viruses, pharmaceuticals, halocetric acids, pesticides, lead, asbestos, arsenic. It goes on and on. Chlordane, atrazine, the issue I'm interested as a farmer, DEET, ibuprofen, lead. It goes on and on. So I think it's similar with any of these serious inline filters that are going to cost you, say, $300 to $600 a year. The other filters that you're more used to, what's in your refrigerator, water filter, or the pouring of a glass into a Brita filter, that's in a different purview. That has more to do with lead or something else. The issues that I'm referring to and those people who have these systems, it's that level of sophistication that I'm interested in. So I'm going to say that's my curiosity, and that's the awareness. And those of you who don't have these, it's not a fault. It's just that, like what Paul Dyer has been saying, is you've just not heard about this before. So there's no reason to feel bad that you haven't been doing this. So I want to just say a few things and I'll stop and then we could ask questions. First, I'm not an expert. I'm a farmer. I'm not a scientist. I asked a few scientists to be on this, and they might be on this anonymously, in that EPA officials or NOAA officials don't want to be quoted on any of this. If you're out there, you might want to say something as an individual, but they know they're wrong. EPA cannot enforce its mandate because it's involved in a political struggle with getting funded. Does that seem obvious to people? So EPA, which should be regulating this, or the state does not regulate this because none of these things are illegal. PFAS, which stands for whatever it stands for, scientists is going to have to help me, but there are 12,000 forms of PFAS. So PFAS come from waterproofing and all kinds of other things added to clothing and shoes and all the goods that you buy in the stores that make you feel good about wearing things. But there are 12,000 of them. They are totally legal to have them in the water. Nothing illegal about it on the state level. There are some bills in the legislature. There's a woman in District 16, Sarah Love. So she's introduced a pilot study, but it's totally legal to have those 12,000 chemicals in the drinking water. And then the issue as a farmer I'm concerned with, which it's about endocrine disruption, that is breast and uterine cancer in women and prostate cancer in men, totally legal. There are no restrictions against those things being in the water you drink, either statewide or federal. So those are my areas of knowledge. The other areas about boiling water, about all of these other issues, I couldn't claim too much expertise. Just a little knowledge that there are issues of poisons. All of those things are not enforced either on the federal level or the state level. And any efforts to make them enforced are opposed by corporations like Bayer, Monsanto, Ciba-Geigy, and when I refer to the farm organization, the Farm Bureau will stop any passage of anything that protects the families of Farm Bureau members, even though they might come down with breast and uterine cancer and all the other stuff I wrote about in the article. They will stop those from passing. They have that power. So I've given up trying to go through the state legislature personally, because I'm 80 and I don't have that. I don't have the time to try and get laws passed about endocrine disruptors. I think I want to stop there. I think I've gone on long enough. Do you want to add something, Michelle?
I will say the article it's a good piece because it gives people sort of a very good background on the different players that are involved with this issue with drinking water and just how pervasive the problem is and where it goes. And it's so multifaceted, because we're not talking about just wastewater treatment plants. We're talking about agricultural runoff. We're talking about the health of the bay. There are just so many factors that come into play with our drinking water. It can seem very overwhelming about where to start and what to do because there are a lot of fingers in a lot of different pots.
One more thing, Michelle, you did send me last week Fox News. So there's just been the most recent evaluation of our region, of the Chesapeake Bay region and our water. So that for the second year, it got a D by the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. And the only coverage it had was the back page of the Post, of the Metro section, and a 19-page piece that you forwarded to me on Fox News in Baltimore. Baltimore seems much more interested in this subject than, not that they've done anything, as Dr. Dyer has pointed out, but there's a little bit more awareness and interest. So I did want to say that. So I think I'm going to stop and take short questions or statements since this is the first that I know of, open discussion of drinking water in the area, really. I mean, if there were other discussions, I would have known about them. This is probably the first discussion on this subject that I know of generally.
Yeah, I think so too. And thank you so much for being here, Michael. And thank you so much as well, Michelle. Martha has her hand up. So Martha?
Yes, Mr. Tabor, thank you so much. This is some valuable information. I go to Tacoma Park Co-op and your food is there, your apples, your pears, whatever. I really enjoy the fact that you're very conscious about growing food that I think you call integrated. I forget, anyway, it's a form of preventing negative chemicals getting into the food. I do want to ask you, do you use a filter, and if so, what type?
Well, we use, when we got married, my wife's right over here, Esther, could you wave? So our sister-in-law, Hannah, gave us a wedding gift. It was a multi-pure. So I could send it online. I don't want to advertise for them. But so she gave us the multi-pure. We didn't know anything about this 35 years ago. And all we needed to do was buy the filter each year and insert it into the sink, into a line coming into a tap on the sink, not the tap for the tap water, but for drinking water or whatever we want to use it for. And we've been using that ever since. So when Dr. Dyer said, what are the concerns? So we have not. So as a child in Brooklyn, growing up in Fort Greene, in my youth, so I could still see myself coming out of the stickball field, and I would glue my mouth up to the tap and take the water from the tap. Well, you can't do that. That's poison. You can't do that. You especially can't do that in Washington or Baltimore. So yes, we that made us aware. Our sister-in-law, who's there in the West Coast, and she made us think more and more. Why do we need this filter? Why do we need to protect ourselves? Why is this water legally healthy? It made us start thinking 35 years ago. In addition to the issue with the sprayer and the poisons in the field, and then washing them in the creeks, it made us start thinking a little bit more about this issue.
Thank you. One other question. Could you tell me the difference between your products, which are labeled integrative pest management as opposed to organic?
Well, we just don't. We just can't comply with. On our farm, we actually do chemical-free fruit, but it's not pretty enough to be sold in the co-op. People want two things. They want prettiness, but they want unsprayed. So my unsprayed, I'll sell them at our farm stand in Adams Morgan or Anacostia or
Brookland,
but I can't sell them to Tacoma Park Co-op. They're not pretty enough. People.
I guess something.
Oh, so it means integrated pesticide management. It's kind of a middle ground between spraying and trying to cut down on the use of pesticides, herbicides.
Okay.
We're trying to make it as healthy as possible, still be pretty, and still be healthy. So that's IPM.
So it can't be what you sell. It cannot be sold as organic.
Actually, everything that comes out of our farm does not have chemicals. Is organic.
Okay, that's great.
I hate to get into too much detail, but because our goal is not to sell in wealthy areas, so Brookland and Anacostia, so we will not go to DuPont Circle. We won't go to Tacoma Park. We think Tacoma Park. So we're certified through a farmer to farmer certification program of other people who would label themselves sustainable. Now I want to say one more thing. We go beyond FDA definition of what organic is. But there's another issue at stake here, and it's a class issue. So when we go to Anacostia or Brookland, for the most part, woman of color or people of color will come up to us. This started like 15 years ago. And the question was, what's not organic? And I said, well, I joked, you can always buy something. And, I treated her lightly, which I should not have done. I said, everything here is organic, as you use the reference. And she said, the reason I asked that is because if it's labeled organic, it's for white, wealthy people. I wasn't aware of that. I mean, I'm saying personally that there's a class reference to organic. It means a higher income white people who live in and expensive.
And it still does. And it still does. It's still considered that to be unaffordable for Black communities.
Yeah. So I've avoided on a class definition. I've avoided the reference to organic. To me, it tells low-income people this is not for you. So I'd like to.
It's a pretty nuanced topic because it's probably more accurate to say insecticide and pesticide free rather than organic.
Yeah, that's what I say, but yeah.
That's how Mike says it. With at his markets, it's insecticide, pesticide free from sustainable farming. The term organic is a label which has, as other labels have over the years, evolved. The meaning behind it has evolved over the years. So it may have had very pure intentions early on, and now it's been perverted a little bit because it's become a buzzword more than an actual sustainable, affordable, universal practice.
Right.
Yeah, these are all good points. So I've avoided using the term organic for many years.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, I want to say that I had an opportunity to go to Mike's farm, and it is one of the nicest places I've ever been to. I really enjoyed the trip. It wasn't as long as I thought it was going to be, and the drive was really pleasant. I don't know if Mike wants to invite people over, but I know
every year, including this year, it's free.
Yeah, exactly. You have open houses sometimes, and it was a wonderful trip. So I encourage everyone who wants to go to contact Mike and see when they could come over.
I still haven't even been to the farm. I'm dying to go.
What's the date this year?
I want to talk about the chemicals.
Sorry, we think it's the first Sunday in June, and it's an open farmhouse. We're one of the few farms that don't charge for the visit. It's free. I think we asked for a potluck lunch. Well, we're not sure if we're going to do that this year, but people bring their children, their families. They go swimming in the creek, and they pick garlic and the stuff we grow, and we try and explain how we grow things without chemicals. And we welcome anybody to come.
I want to bring this up a bit, because if you listen to the water issue, people could think or could assume that it's a political issue. But you got to remember, this water issue has been going on for many presidencies, many governors in your state. So if you think it's something that's due with something of one particular party and another particular party, then they got you chasing your tail. The only way we get out of this, and because it's such a complex issue, you hear what the guy said on the news thing. Well, those are factors. Our lives are at stake, but you get minimized because you probably do something else. Well, do you drink? Well, do you drink coffee, or do you not eat well? So then they can push it off on other factors that the issues that are systematically killing you if you're unable to afford to get away from it. So without them telling you, it's a class system. It's an economic system. It has always been about economics. And if you fall under a certain line, they're okay. They're literally okay with you being sick and dying, because it's stated as such. It's an economic. So don't think of it such a racial issue. Don't think of it such a black and white issue. It's economics. If you fall below a certain economics, they're really okay with you dying. And that's just what it is. It's sick and sad, but the only way we get out of this if we pull together to help people that aren't able to help themselves. And that's been the most difficult part about all of our systems, because they know that very few will ever help the many that needs our help.
So just to be clear, I see some names on here from the Democratic Central Committee in Maryland. This issue is not on the agenda, healthy water. It's just not. It's not. As you say, for the past 6 governors in Maryland, all they do is appoint the head of the Farm Bureau, which I'm very negative about, to head up the Department of Agriculture. And liberal people, just generally good-willed, I'm not putting down liberals, people of goodwill who are Democrats and maybe Republicans, it's not a priority with them personally. We all drink the water, but I can guarantee you outside of this program, this discussion really does not take place as it should. I can't speak for Wes Moore, the new governor, but I suspect this is not on his agenda.
Well,
he knows
it's kind of tough to defend water when you're okay with having developers fund your campaign. And developers care less about water and more about building stuff and destroying stuff than they care about people. So that's kind of tough for, and I don't mean to be crass in what I'm saying, but it's tough to have a politician who has been funded by this to fight for something that they can't fight for because it destroys their business and the economic money they have coming into their business. That's when people say it's a little bit interwoven and interconnected. Well, not really, because like Mike Tabor says, if I'm a corporation and I'm funding his farm, he's going to use pesticides, whether he wants to or not, because I need more productivity out of the farm. So I could care less if he's an activist outside the farm. He will spray his food because I'm funding him. That's not taking place when it comes to politics. There's money involved in politics. There are people behind the money, and people need to be in a certain position. And this is what you call rational biases that we talked about once before. You're able to cognitively rational bias your reason to not fight for water because you're thinking you're fighting for the new traffic stop, or you're thinking you're fighting for the new school, or you're thinking you're fighting for something that needs to be solved, and yet the only people that are really being hurt by the water, again, falls under economic value, who can't afford the $120 filter or the $300 filter or whatever filter you have in there.
Okay, I want to put this in a little bit of perspective, because when I read the Pathways article, when I read some of the things that Mike sent out for us to read before the meeting, I was terrified. Okay, I'm looking at what the National Geographic is saying. Is saying that only about 3% of the Earth's water is fresh water.
Yeah.
And of that, only 1.2% can be used as drinking water, because the rest is locked up in glaciers, ice caps, in permafrost, or buried deep in the ground, or it's salt water. And so we would have to go to desalinization. We know that we have to drink water to survive. And so the idea that we're drinking water with toxins in it and our politicians aren't doing anything, and they know there's a problem, because Mike, you talked about how when you testified before the Maryland, is it House of Delegates? When you testified there, you offered them water from the tap and none of them would take it.
But that's for Black people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm being purposely racist and classist, but I think they all said that's for the hoi polloi. But you're right. I did something. I took some Annapolis drinking water, and I said, I noticed in front of you, all of you good delegates and senators, you're all drinking bottled water. Now, I wonder how many of you would like instead a picture of this nice, healthy Annapolis drinking water out of the tap, out in the sink, out in the anteroom. The most conservative Farm Bureau members just shook their heads. They were not going to surrender. They knew that water was for poor people, common people. They knew it wasn't healthy, but they weren't going to advocate for healthy water because, as Dr. Dyer says, their money is coming from corporate farm interests on the Eastern Shore, Monsanto and DuPont and Bayer and, the agrochemical industry. So they know it, but that's for us.
Yeah, and let's talk about the Farm Bureau. And Michelle, you could come in whenever you want to as well, because that part of the article that's in Pathways magazine was really interesting, because the power of the Farm Bureau and how they are able to allow things to be put in our water, toxins to be put in our water over here that have been banned in Europe, and how our water is treated here as opposed to the way the Europeans look at the chemicals in our water. So Michelle, Michael, whichever one of you want to address those.
Well, there are a couple of different issues. Though, you have the power of special interests like the Farm Bureau, which is obviously historically connected with politics and influencing politics. So with the Farm Bureau's perspective, they influence agricultural policy, they influence chemical policy, and it's also a regulatory issue. It's the way that chemicals are regulated versus how other things are regulated. It's completely separate. So it's complicated, and the Farm Bureau just has such a long history and has gotten its fingers into so many different pockets. And I mean, this week, for instance, Mike and I were talking earlier, is the annual conference for an organization called Future Harvest. And Future Harvest, their mandate is to prepare farmers and small farmers and for, the agricultural world and for producing farms. And we were looking at the agenda of the conference, and there is not a single session that talks about water. Something absolutely essential and elemental to growing anything. Not a single session for future farmers talks about water and the dangers of water or the chemicals in water. And as someone who was looking at it with absolutely no background in it, that was my first takeaway, was they're not talking about this at all from a policy perspective, how to help farmers advocate for themselves, even if they wanted to. But they are so held down they are not, what's the word I'm looking for, but they're so beholden to chemical companies for their livelihoods that there's no incentive for them to break free, even if they want to. And as Mike can tell you, secretly they want to, but they would never say that publicly because they fear backlash from the companies or from their neighbors who may feel differently. So,
I mean, you're on target on everything. Just one little exercise. So if you want to probe into this a little more, if you're in Maryland, you have usually 3 delegates and 1 state senator, not everybody. So I'm in District 20. So I have Lori Charkoudian, and then I've got David Moon and Janelle Wilkins, and as a state senator, I've got Will Smith. So of those 4, they're knowledgeable. Will Smith, my senator, Jamie Raskin, used to be very supportive of this when he was that's when I tried to have an atrazine bill. But Will has kind of eased back from it. He doesn't return my phone calls.
Hold on. I'll call out Will Smith right now. He's compromised.
As long as I don't have to do it.
He's compromised, and he's told on himself by not speaking to his constituents. Will Smith, as far as I can throw a 2-ton truck, has been compromised. And it's a sad fact. But people who don't need Will Smith will keep voting him in. The people that need Will Smith is not enough to get him out. That's our problem. Next.
Do you know if Will Smith is a member of the Farm Bureau?
I was told almost everybody. So, for instance, I don't know how many people know it. Nationwide Insurance Company is owned by the Farm Bureau. So if any of you are nationwide holders, you are already, it used to be called Farm Bureau Insurance. Now it's nationwide. It sounds better. I'm not going to comment as critically because Will is my senator and I'm hoping he will do things. But Lorig is beyond belief. Lorig is an amazing advocate. But there's an exercise here. You all are from District 16, 14, 13, and some of you might be Prince George's County, or some of you might be in the district. Try and do the exercise of calling your rep on the county council if you're in DC, or your rep in terms of your delegate or your state senator. Ask them what they're doing on this issue. Just ask them you're educated now. Ask them, so I'd like to know, are you going to propose a bill for clean drinking water? Are you? get them to answer you. That's a great exercise. Now, Will Smith, I would like to say I have hope, but your assessment is your assessment, and it's as good as anybody's. I'd like to still think Will would get involved in this issue. He's backed away, sadly.
Well,
but Lori is a little bit beyond belief.
But nationally, no one's fights for the water. Nationally, in any state, pick a state. How about this? I have another exercise for you. Try to find a county in the United States that is fighting for clean water. Find one county and please report on that county. That's your exercise, because you would look long and hard and you're not going to find one. Not one county. We're not talking about individuals in the county. We're not even talking about individuals. Yeah.
Is the Allen Cone that has Allen down there? Is that Allen Cone? I don't know. I see Allen, but I guess for the most part, I agree. I think there's one organic farmer. His name is Tester in Utah. And I think he has actually, the lone senator has tried to act on this issue. And he's an organic rancher or farmer.
John Tester?
Yeah, Tester has actually.
I think he's Minnesota, isn't he? Tester?
I think it was Utah. I'm not sure. Oh, it's not. So anyway.
The article
Montana. He's Montana. Tester's
Montana.
Okay. But the article about campers
again, I'm in District 20, and I see Karen Elrick here. I'm trying to provoke a discussion on this, because when I asked one of the leaders in Tacoma Park, what about drinking water, his quote, and I can't name names, was, "I don't care about drinking water." And he's one of the leaders of our, he said, "I couldn't care less." I wrote that down. And he's probably one of the leaders, you would identify him as a liberal leader who ran for an important office the last time. So as a result, I've turned to other people in Tacoma Park to see, is there an interest in this issue? You might be right. There might not be an interest.
Alan is showing himself. I don't know if he wants to say something.
Is it Alan Cohn?
Yeah. Did you have a question for me?
Well, is his assessment right? Are there any national spokespeople on this issue?
On the PFAS or on
Paul?
I mean, I think environmental working group is probably the biggest.
No. What Paul said is show me an elected political figure that's taken a strong stand on drinking water, good drinking water. And, the best I could come up with is Tester, Senator Tester.
I think Cory Booker. I think Cory Booker certainly is aware of these issues.
But is he an advocate?
I don't know.
I'll stand by Paul Dyer's assessment. I go along with it.
Okay, I have a question, because from reading the Pathways article, and tell me if I misinterpreted it, it seems like chemicals could be put in our water without the manufacturers proving that the chemical is safe. Whereas in Europe, you have to prove that the chemical is safe before their environmental protection agency will let it be disseminated without
it's called a participatory.
Which is why some chemicals are banned in Europe, but are allowed to be put in our water here.
Again, Alan is pretty knowledgeable about this, but it's called a participatory principle.
Precautionary principle.
Precautionary
principle. Right. In our pesticide regulation, we have a risk benefit statute. So something like 2,4-D, which definitely causes non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, is used so much. It's off patent. It's cheap. It's very difficult for it to be bounced out of registration because there's so much profit in it. It's a foolish system. FIFRA is a law that was written in 1947 by chemical companies. It's not like the Clean Air Act or the Clean Water Act, which gets stronger and stronger each year as more science drives the numbers down of harmful effect numbers. down. So the parts per billion is now parts per trillion of some chemicals with the Clean Water Act. But pesticides are regulated on a different basis, this risk-benefit statute, which is really biased towards the chemical companies. So that's why we have all these atrazine and other chemicals in our water.
And what can we do to level things up a bit? Because, I mean, we have the cancer rates, we have all sorts of diseases that we don't know what are being associated. We have, it seems to me that we have to prove that this needs to be regulated more. So what can we do to get things to be regulated more?
Alan?
That is $1 million question.
Right. I think the Beyond Pesticides group has been trying to get a reform of FIFRA for many years, and then maybe they're closer to it now. But now the House changed over. But that has to happen in this country to have to change the way pesticides are regulated. But that's just the pesticides. Things like the industrial chemicals like PFAS, that's in a whole different system. That's the RCRA law. So it's difficult. Its industry has been in charge of our chemical regulation system for many years. So it's a difficult thing to move away from.
Zanita has a question.
These politicians and these executives of these companies, do they not drink water?
They don't drink this water.
Yeah, they don't.
So
Exactly.
It's okay. It's okay. They don't drink this water, and they won't.
Well, it used to be that a politician had to live in the district over which they resided. Like Flint, those politicians did not live in Flint, so they didn't care. But if they were forced to live in Flint and had to drink that water every day, it would change.
If the politician lived in the middle of Baltimore, they still wouldn't drink that water because they would have such a filtration system that would rival New York City. So it wouldn't matter to them. That's. Go ahead, Bernadette.
Well, yeah. Thank you guys for this discussion, and by the way, I haven't seen all of you guys since the New Year. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. I think it goes back to Marilyn's question and a number of points that were brought up. I think basically Marilyn's question was, how do we get the government to regulate more? And the reason why everyone is fumbling or talking about huge systemic issues is because this country was founded on the relentless pursuit of profit. That's just, and every time we make a distinction between this country and the European Union, for example, is because we have a system that has that puts profits over people. That's just it. But when it comes to water, though, there have been a number of comments about how the powers that be don't drink this water, but we have to bathe in it. We have to cook with it. I don't think that individual efforts can overcome this major fundamental environmental issue. My question is, how do we stop advocating in a way that that says that only marginalized people will be impacted by this issue? How do we talk about the universal harms? Because you can't, at an individual level, overcome these chemicals. You have to be a billionaire to have a moat, to have water brought in for you. Even if you're an upper middle class professional person who lives in Potomac, Maryland, you will be impacted by these chemicals. So how do we, I'm sorry if I'm babbling, but how do we talk about these issues in a way where we get away from the old paradigm of saying only poor people, only marginalized people will be impacted? We will all be impacted if we are trapped in this capitalist system.
But Bernadette, here's why. the quote powers that be is going to have a difficult time understanding the impact. They have better health care than the marginalized person. So they can get better treatment even if they do get sick more than a marginalized person. They'll catch it, they'll have the sniffles, and they can go to their doctor and probably get an appointment that day or at least that week. A marginalized person has to maybe call the doctor and then wait for an appointment, wait for an opening. So there's all these different things that creates a less of an impact that they will ever see focused on. So you're completely right. Everyone will not escape this issue. But if I'm going to escape it less, then I ignore it less or I ignore it more. You know what I mean? So that's how it's wavered. Because we are built on a capitalist system, and profit builds policy over people.
So I'm struggling with this too, because like somebody just said, don't we all drink the water and don't we all breathe the air? So I don't understand how these people who are in charge can think that they're escaping it or able to ignore it somehow. So I keep thinking about different strategies. And I think it's a multi-pronged strategy that needs to happen. I think that people have to be talking to their elected officials and relentlessly to not let it fade, or to keep it alive and active and find allies and find coalitions of people to work on that level. But then there have to be some low-hanging fruits, which, of course, still aren't really.
I want to thank everyone for listening to You Be the Judge. We're going to cut off our thing, but we're going to continue to be talking here. Sorry. We're going to continue to be talking here. So if everyone wants to join us on another show every Wednesday at 6 p.m. So I want you to be kind, be compassionate, and be safe.